The debate over national sovereignty versus EU authority is especially heated when it comes to migration and border management. Who should be responsible for securing Europe's external borders? When should the European Union step in to manage migration flows? And where should national governments retain full control over their own policies? These are fundamental questions that define the political landscape in Europe today. And migration has been one of the most divisive issues in EU politics over the last decade. The migration crisis of 2015 exposed deep flaws in the EU's ability to manage large-scale arrivals of asylum seekers and economic migrants. Countries on the EU's external borders, particularly Greece, Italy, and Spain, struggled to cope with the numbers. And meanwhile, other member states resisted mandatory relocation schemes, arguing that they should have the sovereign right to determine who enters their country. And this situation revealed a fundamental weakness in EU migration policy: the lack of a clear balance between national responsibility and European solidarity. The Dublin regulation is at the center of this debate. This law, first introduced in 1990 and revised multiple times, dictates that the first EU country an asylum seeker enters is responsible for processing their claim. In theory, this prevents asylum seekers from applying in multiple countries. In practice, it places a huge burden on frontline states, forcing them to handle the majority of asylum cases simply because of their geographic location. And this is neither fair nor sustainable. Countries like Greece and Italy have long argued that migration is a European issue and that other member states should share the responsibility. But many governments, particularly in Central and Eastern Europe, reject any system of mandatory quotas, insisting that migration policy should remain a national competence. To address these challenges, the EU recently agreed on the new Pact on Migration and Asylum, known here where I live in Germany as the Gemeinsames Europäisches Asylsystem in GEAS. It's a big topic here, that's why I said it in German for once. And this reform aims to replace the dysfunctional Dublin system with a more balanced approach. Under GEAS, asylum applications will still be processed primarily in the country of first entry, but member states will now have the option to share responsibility through a flexible solidarity mechanism. And this means that countries unwilling to take in asylum seekers must contribute financially or provide logistical support instead. The agreement also includes stricter border procedures to speed up asylum decisions and deportations where necessary. However, critics argue that while GEAS introduces improvements, it still does not create a fully fair distribution of asylum seekers across Europe. Some countries remain concerned that the burden will still fall disproportionately on southern states, while others fear that financial contributions are not a sufficient alternative to actual relocation efforts. And this is where the tension between sovereignty and EU authority becomes most evident. Some member states demand stronger EU involvement, including an automatic relocation mechanism that distributes asylum seekers more evenly across Europe. Others insist that migration should be handled at the national level, with each country deciding for itself how many people to accept and under what conditions. And this division has prevented meaningful reform of the Dublin regulation for years, and only now with GEAS is a new framework emerging. Although it's just a first step, it's not the big solution. The European Border and Coast Guard Agency, commonly known as Frontex, is another controversial issue. Frontex was created to assist member states in managing external borders, providing additional personnel and technical support where needed. Over the years, its mandate has expanded, and it now has the authority to deploy border guards and intervene in crisis situations. But the question remains, should border protection be primarily a national responsibility, or should the EU have a greater role? Some argue that without a unified border force, Europe cannot control migration effectively. Others worry that expanding Frontex's powers undermines national sovereignty and gives too much authority to Brussels. The 2021 crisis at the Belarus-Poland border highlighted these issues. When Belarus encouraged migrants to cross into the EU, Poland took a hardline approach, refusing to allow them entry and accusing Belarus of orchestrating a hybrid attack against the EU. The EU supported Poland diplomatically, but had little power to intervene directly. And this situation raised an important question. Should the EU have the ability to enforce border security measures in emergencies, even if a member state resists intervention? Or should national governments always have the final say? Another major challenge is irregular migration. The Mediterranean remains one of the most dangerous migration routes in the world, and thousands of people attempt the journey each year, often relying on human traffickers and unsafe boats. EU naval operations like Operation Sophia were designed to combat smuggling networks and rescue migrants at sea. But their effectiveness has been questioned, and not only once. Some argue that such operations create a pull factor, encouraging more people to attempt the dangerous journey. Others believe that abandoning search and rescue efforts would lead to even more unnecessary deaths. Again, the fundamental question remains, should migration control be an EU responsibility, or should individual countries decide their own policies? And a related issue is border security funding. The EU provides financial support to member states to strengthen border control infrastructure, including surveillance systems, fences, and patrols. However, this funding often comes with conditions, limiting how national governments can use it. Hungary, for example, has repeatedly clashed with the EU over its border policies, rejecting external interference while demanding more EU funding for security. And this raises another dilemma. Should the EU finance border protection without having a say in how it is implemented? Or should financial support come with stricter EU oversight? The broader question in all of this is how migration policy should be structured. I believe that the EU must have a role, but that role must be carefully defined. There are areas where European coordination is absolutely necessary, and managing external borders, fighting human trafficking, and ensuring a fair asylum system cannot be handled by individual countries alone. And the reality is that migration is a cross-border issue by nature, and no single member state can fully control it on its own. But at the same time, national governments must retain the ability to make key decisions about who enters their country and under what conditions. Migration affects national identity, security, and social systems, issues that cannot be simply dictated from Brussels. And the solution lies in finding a fair division of responsibilities. The EU should focus on improving Frontex's capacity to assist countries facing migration pressure without overriding national control. It should work on strengthening border security while respecting international obligations to asylum seekers. And it must create a migration system that balances solidarity with national sovereignty, ensuring that frontline states are not left to deal with the issue alone, but also that no country is forced to accept policies against its will. Reforming migration policy is essential here, and the current system has been broken for years, and without a real change, the EU will continue to face migration crises without an effective response. The new GEAS framework is a step forward, but it will never fully resolve the tensions between national sovereignty and EU authority, and we need more development in that area. But finding a balance is the real challenge, and it is a challenge that will define the future of the European Union's role in migration policy. And if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen.